Welcome to the 180 podcast. I'm your host, Paul, and this week we have a very special guest, as always. Two very special guests because today I have a guest co host, Henry Chow. Henry.
Yeah, so my name
How
is
you doing?
Henry. I am a recent graduate of Simon Fraser University, majored in English, but I took up an interest in videography in the crew. I'm currently the marketing lead for the crew and yeah, the resident videographer as well.
Great. So Henry's quite interested in videography and doing films and editing. So, what we like to do here is talk about different topics, career, professional, personal, with young people. And I thought it'd be a good idea to bring one of our alumni from years past, over 10 years, not to age us there, Steve. Steve Tan, again. So, Steve was a member of our group for a little bit, had a cup of coffee, more like an espresso, I think. And he spent his most of his career in filming and videography, editing. He also did my wedding last summer, which was really great, and it was a great chance for me and Steve and his partner to connect. So we thought we'd have him on the show, give us a bit of a reintroduction to our group, and also provide the fine audience that we have some tips and tricks of the trade in freelance and videography, filmmaking, making YouTube ads, maybe because that's something we've been looking into in our group. So welcome Steve Tan to the show. Woo!
Thanks, Paul. It's quite the intro. You didn't tell me that I'd have to age myself to be on the show.
It's part of the game, man. Part of the game.
It's nice to be here.
All right. Well,
So what are we talking about?
We're talking about you. So why don't you give the fine people an introduction, just maybe a little bit about yourself, about your career, kind of does it take to be whatever you call yourself, actually. I don't know what your title, your official title actually is.
Man.
I've not checked your LinkedIn. I know I'm very poor
Yeah.
Researcher here.
The thing is, like, when you're a freelancer, you have to do everything, right? That's one of the hard lessons that you learn when you tell your employer that I'm done working for you. I'm going to work for myself now. And, I never need to do all of the things I don't like to do. I just want to do the things that I want to do. I just want to film cool things all the time. And then you realize that no, most of the time you're writing contracts or like paying taxes or I don't know, marketing or networking. And you kind of have to love what it is you do enough to put up with all those other things that you need to do in order just to do the thing you want to do. But yeah, you can call me a videographer, photographer, editor.
Maybe just kind of tell us, like, from the beginning, like who you are and how'd you get into the field that you're in now?
Yeah, well, it all started as like an accident, really. When was it? Like 2008 was kind of the time when I started taking my own videos and editing them seriously, I guess, or not seriously, like consistently. It was right around the time the MacBooks went Intel, and me being a PC guy all my life decided to try the Macs, and there was this app called iMovie, and it just made editing videos a lot more intuitive. Like before that app came along, I think it was like Windows Movie Maker or something, and you could try to make something that looks good, but it just wasn't. It always looked like home video, right? And I think in iMovie was the first time I was editing stuff, and I was like, oh, this looks like half decent, and it ended up being just like this thing I like doing, right? I would shoot videos on the weekend and edit them throughout the week after work in the evenings. And it got to a point where, my employer at the time kind of saw what I was posting and sharing on Facebook and said, hey, do you want to help us with some videos at work? And I said, of course. Unfortunately, I have like back then, cell phone cameras and whatever were terrible. And so were a lot of the gear. But luckily, my employer was very supportive, and they bought a office camera that basically I could use at any time, and supported like coursework as well. Like I took some courses, and they're like, if you finish the course, you can submit the thing and we'll reimburse. It was a great place to be, and I was really interested in it, so I made a lot of mistakes real quick and learned really quick. And yeah, fast forward a few years, I ended up doing more work on weekends and evenings than my actual 9 to 5. And so I just, let them know. Um, oh no, it was when I had my first kid, when I had Mason, right around 2011. So about 3 years into this new hobby of mine, I took some parental leave and I decided not to go back.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So was there another career path that you were looking at doing before you kind of fell into this video editing and filmography gig?
Yeah, it was a lot of soul searching at the time, so I was primed to be ready for anything. Like when I finished high school, I was really into like video game design, or like desktop design. I did the school yearbook course, not the course. Well, I guess like it's like there's a class at my high school where it's like a multi-grade class, and you get together and it's practical, right? Like you learn photography, desktop publishing, but also like business side of things, like getting ads and sponsorships, and there's a bit of journalism as well. And you basically, this class puts together the yearbook, right? So I did this class for 3 years in a row. So, I had a bit of that, like the Photoshop, what do you call it, InDesign, the Illustrator, and also, like the asking for sponsorships and putting together like sponsorship packages and stuff like that. And I always thought I'd do something that was graphics related, but because I wasn't super sure about what it is I wanted to do, and my parents really pressured me to go to university, I kind of ended up going to university, but without a clear goal. Yeah. Of course, your parents just want what's best for you, and in their mind, you know, I would be the most valuable to society with a degree, right? I think I'm paraphrasing, but basically they said, get a degree, any degree, and then do what you want, right? Whereas I'm like, I want to go to art school. Anyways, the university thing didn't work out. I was at UBC for 4 or 5 years, and then kind of just racking up student debt without really going anywhere. So I actually took a break from that, and took a marketing assistant and marketing coordinator job at a not-for-profit, and that's where I had the chance to kind of you know put out newsletters and write press releases, and also do the photography and do the video as well.
This is way too uncanny.
Henry's smiling right now.
This is crazy. Yeah. So I'm in a similar boat, I guess. Went into university, but like I originally had a direction, but kind of lost that direction along the way. And then now I'm trying to get into like a sort of marketing coordinator job as well, sort of like you. Yeah, social media coordinator, that sort of stuff. So yeah, very, very uncanny. What a coincidence.
Yeah, sometimes it's you think that like I remember in high school when it seems so obvious to you know just keep going, right? And in high school, like elementary school, high school, it's easy because the choices are very limited. um that's a whole other problem, but anyway, the choices are very limited and it's very clear what direction. It's only one direction basically. And when people like took gap years, you're like, oh, what a waste of time. Like they're not doing schooling, they're just, I don't know, bumming around, right? But once you finish secondary education, once you finish high school, it's like there are so many different ways you can go. And if your job is to be, if your goal is to become like a professor, yeah, go to university, right? Do the things. But um, in my case, where I wasn't like really sure, like kind of charging into university, or at least being told to do that, wasn't in hindsight, it wasn't the best way to go. It's not for everyone. I'm not saying post-secondary is not great. I'm just saying it's not for everyone.
Wait, so what have you done if you hadn't gone to university, just straight into like searching for different jobs that you might do, or like developing into videography?
Maybe not. I mean, like I said, at the time, like a lot of my peers at the time, we were like really into video games, and I was like, I had a bit of programming background as well, just not through schooling, but through just as a hobby on the side. I knew a bit of programming, and I was like, oh, it would be great if I could, make games, right? And I knew nothing about it, but I was interested enough that I wanted to try, but I wasn't like as sure and strong about it that I like fought against what my parents wanted me to do after grade 12. So I could have ended up doing something totally different if my parents been like, no, it's fine, you do whatever you want.
Oh, cool.
All right.
When did you make your first video then?
Oh, geez, I don't know. I feel like I've always been making videos, but like I said, it's just the tools I had at the time were not inspiring, right? I remember this is like even in high school when we went snowboarding with class trips, we'd had, these weird shape. They look like an old school iPod, but shoots video, right? So it almost looked like a phone nowadays. Come to think of it, but only shoots video and had weird names and stuff, and quality wasn't any good, but it was convenient. You can put it in your pocket, right? And we'd edit them, and it's like, okay, the only reason why we watch them and we care is just because we're in it, but really, star wipes, and it's no good. All right, no one's gonna watch it. And it's like,
do you remember your first paid video that you made? Like maybe one that you really like, hey, this is gonna go to a client for the first time and they're actually gonna pay us money to do star wipes.
the luckily I wasn't doing Star Wars by then. My first paid one was actually it wasn't like a paid one that I'd asked for money. A good friend of mine was a bridesmaid in a wedding, and she basically convinced her friend, she's like, you need to hire my friend Steve. He's like, she's like, he's the best wedding videographer. And she's like, hey, you can do weddings, right?
You got to run before you
God.
walk. That's how.
Yeah, and I still have that video somewhere on Vimeo, and I look at it, I'm like, it's actually not super terrible. Yeah, I mean, it's terrible, but not like super terrible.
Was it still with iMovie or different program?
It was absolutely iMovie, and if if I
Okay.
didn't have iMovie, I would not have agreed.
Oh.
Yeah, so this is back in 2008, maybe 9, but yeah.
So do you feel like in that juncture, and maybe this is a bit more technical, like I'm always curious about like the editing part and the filming part. Do you feel like because you had a stronger sense of capturing the raw data that you were able to make something out of it, or do you feel like because we had the technology to just cut pictures or whatever in and out that it made it for a lot better production or easier production for that first video?
Yeah, it's hard to say, because I feel like while iMovie was a big step from Windows Movie Maker or whatever I was using before, the whole time I was using the less than ideal situation, like the lesser cameras, the lesser software, I can't say that they were absolutely, of no value, right? It's like every single mistake you make, even though you don't, invent the light bulb, it's like you found another way not to, and you've learned from it, right? So I I would be I would still have to like mention that, or at least acknowledge that it played a role in where, I went. But there are certain times where, you kind of once in a while, when you're ready for it, you like kind of like jump ahead instead of stepping ahead, right? And I feel like having the editing tool that fits the way that I think and the way that I work really helped give me a big like leap forward. Yeah. Same with video cameras. Right around that time, 2009, 2010 was the time when DSLR started shooting video for the first time. And prior to that, it was hard to use relatively affordable video cameras to get the look that we're, kind of like the Hollywood look, right? And right around that time, Nikon D90 and Canon 5D Mark II accidentally added video to their camera. They weren't even, like, it was such an afterthought of a feature, but it was also one of those like big leap forwards where people like me can spend, what was it, like $3,000 on a camera and get like a Hollywood look without spending, 5 digits getting a, proper Hollywood camera set up.
Yeah, I mean that's when we started getting HD, cameras on our phone, right?
Oh yeah.
So there's no way your DSLR couldn't shoot like 1080p if your phone, for half the price, maybe way more than half the price, because it was only a couple $100 back then for a decent iPhone, like $600. When I say a couple $100, right?
Yeah. So like video is becoming more prevalent, and also like big sensor video cameras where people can actually afford them. Yeah. So yeah, so the right tools can help. And I was also in that stage where I was ready for it. I was in the right time, right place, and I was ready to take advantage of those. Right? They could have come along, and if I wasn't as interested or if I wasn't as aware, it could just totally pass me by. Right? So I was just happened to be really into it at the time when it became available.
So after you did the one wedding video, of course you've done many more since. What's your portfolio been like in the last 10 years? I mean, you've been mostly freelancing or you've been working for, like, I guess MEC is one of the corporate companies you kind of went back into. Kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
what does your portfolio look like in the last couple of years?
Well, I still love shooting weddings. There's something about weddings where it's like well, actually in general I like shooting with people, especially if they have stories. I love being outdoors, so there's a lot of overlap there with weddings, and plus weddings is such a fun time and such a big huge milestone for like people and their families. And I actually come from a small but pretty tight family, so it seems like I have a big family. So I'm used to like lots of family gatherings, and I just love the dynamic of having multi-generational, gatherings. Um, so I still do weddings, but luckily I also have like some corporate stuff, some real estate stuff, which has been really helpful through COVID, since
Mhm.
weddings has been put on the back burner for a lot of it.
Do you have any pet projects that you do by yourself, like just passion projects?
I do. I try to I don't know if I actually have like a formal criteria for which projects that I do for like, it's just sometimes I just get a feeling. Like there's this athlete, her name is Judith Kasiyama. I can send you guys like a Instagram link or something.
Profile, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And she is advocating for just more diversity and more inclusion in the outdoors. And
Mhm.
that's a cause that's I truly believe in as well. So I support her in a lot of different ways whenever I can. And it's been mutually beneficial for us, because not only do I get to help cover some of their events and help them uh, kind of increase their reach in a way, like kind of help them create content so that she could, let people know of all these cool things that she's doing. But also it's given me a lot of opportunities as well. Like I would consider myself in some of those activities like someone who's like new and intimidated by it. But because of her programs, I was able to try things like ice climbing, which is
Mhm.
something that I don't think I would have gone and done, right? But by joining and filming their events, I've been able to do some of that, like canyoning as well. I think we're going to do like this big sailing trip later on in May. Yeah, so things like that where, sometimes I just get a right feeling for it. I'll just do that. Um, Quite a few years ago, there was this event called Hell Portrait, and it happens around the holidays. And they were donating their time and their resources to like take photographs of people in need, and just creating like a memory for them, right? Printing a card or a photo on the spot so they can send it to their loved ones, right? And so that was a nice thing as well that I helped with. Yeah, so I don't know if it's a formal thing. Sometimes I just get a feeling. I'm like, you know what? I believe in it. I have some time. I can, I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where I can give back, and sometimes I just do.
Cool.
You know.
It's like it's mostly covering other events. Do you have like any like really experimental videos, I guess, like where you try to branch out and like try to use different effects or like just mess around in After Effects or something? Like, that
Yeah,
sort of stuff.
After Effects is definitely one of those like frontiers where I'd love to get more into, but I haven't had the time to quite dive
Yeah.
right in. Yeah, it's been a lot of ad hoc where I know it can do literally everything. So
Mhm.
it's kind of like project by project where someone will say, "Hey, I need to do this," and I'm like, "I know I can do it, and let me just find out how."
Yeah, you learn how to, yeah, exactly. Can't really learn
Yeah.
everything from After Effects just in like one
Oh, I
session or something.
Oh, for sure. Not too long ago, close to one of my last projects at MEC, I had a pretty famous, like locally famous trail runner. The idea was that he was racing himself, and we actually had a
Oh,
shot where he was like running past him, and we had to like uh, basically create a mat to separate out the two different
yeah.
layers of him running past. And that was such a fun thing to do, where I had to look it up, and then realizing that it actually some of these tasks actually take a lot of time and work. It's like sometimes it's like this magic button where you click, and sometimes it's literally just painstakingly frame by
Yeah,
frame.
manual or
Yeah,
like tracing or like
yeah,
whatever, keyframing it.
yeah,
Great.
yeah, yeah. And sometimes that's just the way it is, right? And that's why sometimes you see in those end credits of Hollywood movies, and there's like just teams of people. It's because it takes a lot of work.
But
Yeah, a
then it's
lot of
just you for freelancing.
yeah.
Wait, does that ever bother you though? Like not having such a big team to do these videos?
Uh, you know, I like kind of being in a light mobile team. I've been in situations where it just, you know what, I'm gonna say it's sometimes nice too. I've also I shot a reality series with a good friend of mine, and I was on the secondary camera, and I had people running batteries and memory cards to me, and checking in to make sure I had water and food. I'm like, this is amazing. I don't have to do anything, right? And then
Mhm.
there are literally shoots where I've done end to end, where I've storyboarded with a client, shot it, did all the did all the logistics with the permits and the model releases and location releases, and all the editing, coloring, sound production, and towards the end, right? um and I'd say like each has got their like pros and cons, and I do love working with people, so you know it is nice to have kind of someone on your team as well, which is why it's great, Paul, as you know, Meg, who is basically my partner in everything, right?
Mhm.
um, it's so great to have her there as like a second eye, a second like opinion to bounce ideas off of. Yeah, just just to have there on your team.
If you were starting out, so if you're starting out again, let's say, I mean, because you mentioned a lot of different things, right? You mentioned a lot of different skill sets and a lot of different support functions that are helpful. But if you were to say start over again, or you're advising someone like a Henry on, hey, you want to
Mhm.
get into doing this, what do you think are the most important things you need to know how to do, right off the bat? If should you invest in equipment first? Should you invest in training first? Should you just start taking your camera phone out? Like, what would you say is the best way to get started these days?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think for me, um, getting out there, getting your name out there, like meeting people who are in the industry. I know that for me, a lot of the time, a lot of these like breakout opportunities were just through meeting new people through, different opportunities, right? I recently did actually, I don't know if I can say I did it. I did a stock shoot with a pretty big like national brand, and it was all because I was working with this um, organization over time, and it was like it wasn't it wasn't like a big it wasn't like a big money thing. It was more like I believed in their cause and I just supported them. And I was happy with the kind of work I was producing for them, and I was happy that I was able to contribute. And it just so happened that they worked with a national partner, and it was like now I did this big shoot for them, right? And which is something I don't think that I would have been able to do had I not known or worked through this organization, right? So a lot of the time, I think just getting out there and meeting people and just shooting lots, shoot as much as you can, edit as much as you can, make as many mistakes as you can so that you can learn from it. But also like, kind of post your work and also look at other people's work and comment on it, and like kind of like give back to the community, right? Give back by creating content, sharing content, commenting on other people's content. And then, soon you'll create like a little, I don't know, like a group where people will know you and can refer you, and you can learn from these people, they can learn from you. Hopefully you'll have like experience you can share. I think that's been really helpful in my career. Like it's never been about the gear, right? It's always been like whatever gear you can afford, use it, right? If you need it, rent it, right? If you don't have it or you can't afford it, ask around, right? Ask your friends, this is also the other part too, where you create industry friends, right? Like I have quite a few friends who are, you know, I wouldn't take their gear for free, even if they offered it. Like I would still give them money, but create those relationships where you can rely on other people and count on other people and ask them. So yeah.
You said practice, right? But how did you really get in those hours for shooting and like practicing videography at the beginning? Was it just like covering events or like stuff that you did throughout the year or?
Yeah. When I first started, this is back when I was working for the small not-for-profit, and the executive director basically, like I said, they bought an office camera, but I was the only one who used it. And he said, you know what? Feel free to take it out anytime. If you break it, you buy it. But basically, it was very generous. And so on the weekends, I would just take it out and shoot anything and everything that I can think of. Right. I had a friend who played. What was that? The traditional Chinese instrument where you pluck the strings. What do
I
they
don't
call
remember the
that?
name either. It was like PayPal.
Karina's mom plays it, and I don't even know what
Yeah,
the name
guzheng,
is.
right?
Oh,
Is that what it's
good.
called?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
so.
So I had a friend who played that. I'm like, hey, can I just like create a mini like video about you doing? She's like, sure, and I did, right?
Hmm.
Just like I had a friend who like played dodgeball, and I'm like, hey, can I create a video of you playing dodgeball? She's like, sure, and I just, anything and everything, right? And at the time, it was all just, it was fun, right? I wanted to do it. And yeah, it was a big learning experience, but also practical. And I feel invested because it's like, I've got a client, even if it was like, I wasn't like hired to do it, so to speak. I,
You
took a,
wanted to produce results for them to show a cool video that they could see, basically.
yeah, yeah. Basically just to like give yourself projects. I don't know if you ever tried vlogging, and I did this recently where I'm like, well, I've got clients who are looking to start YouTube channels, and I'm helping them with that and creating content. It's like they feel like silly being on camera. I'm like, well, I gotta show them how it's done. And so when you first do something, and it's different, it's like, yeah, this feels kind of silly, but over time you get used to it, and then not only do you get used to it, you get like better at it. Yeah. So you just have to, that's what I mean by shooting lots. It's like make up excuses to go out and shoot. Like for me, recently, one of the things that I'm totally into since like October of last year was mountain biking. And I make up excuses to be on my bike. Like, oh, I need to go get some groceries. I'll grab my bike and do it with a backpack or something instead of, like properly. And I'll make like two
Driving, yeah.
trips. Yeah. I'll make two trips because my backpack's too small.
So becoming like a professional videographer is really a gradual thing. It's not like an instant like, okay, I decided to become a videographer. It's more like I'm doing this on the side as a hobby, and like since I've gotten good at it, I do side jobs, and then even more people are connected to me and they give me these jobs. So it becomes like a snowball, I guess, in that sense, and how to become a videographer.
Yeah, my that was my journey. It was a hobby that I just really like doing, and then eventually I ended up working in my hobby more than my day job. And then, like I said, right around that time, my first son was born, and I took some parental leave, and it kind of gave me a chance to just do my hobby. Um, and I was like, oh, I think I can do this, and I did for a couple of years. And then I had my second kid, and I was like, I can't do this. Yeah,
Oh,
that's more of like a life time management organization thing where at the time, I felt like when I was freelancing, I was missing out on like family life, and when I was with the kids and doing family life, I felt like I should be working.
yeah.
And so that's when I started at MEC, and I was like, you know what, I need to kind of reset everything, kind of have work from like 9 to 5, 8 to 4 or something, and then leave work at work. And it really did help at the time, when they were younger, and it gave me the option to really be present. Yeah,
Time management definitely very important.
yeah.
Are there people in the industry that are more like filming all the time, and then there's editors, or are they more editors? Um, like, what's the mix like? Is it always kind of everyone knows how to do everything, or like have you're going to be like a kick-ass editor? You better be up there and like have people throw work at you, because I mean, if you could do it yourself, you wouldn't outsource it, right?
Right.
What's that mix? And there's storyboarding. I find I have lots of ideas for storyboards, but without a good storyboard, you can't really like get out of bed to go film it, right? Um,
Right. I
makes
think it
sense.
totally depends on like which circles you run in. Like for me, because I'm more of like the almost like solo or really small team, we kind of have to be good at everything, right? But
Mhm.
I do have friends who are, like in the union and stuff where they're just like a kick-ass DP or they're a kick-ass camera operator and they know like equally amazing, drone pilots who that's all they do, or colorists and all they do is color, or sound recordists and stuff. So it really depends, and I think there's room for everyone. In bigger budgets where the workload is really high and it's not possible for one person to do it all, even if they're that great. And there's also like room for people like me where we're more involved in the project in from like every standpoint. And it's also like it depends on the project itself as well. Like not every project has a budget to have a team of a dozen or more, right? So
Mhm.
yeah.
Where do you see yourself taking, I guess, your portfolio? Do you think it's going to be more of the same? Do you think you're going to lean to one story, more of the storytelling, directing, more of the editing, more of the filming? Or is there anything you've thought about that in terms of your mix?
That's a good question.
That's
The
the type of
problem
questions
is,
you get here at the 180
yeah,
podcast, brought to you
yeah.
by no one.
Yeah, tough question. Um, it's hard to say because for me, I feel like the thing I love about my job is the fact that I get to do all of it, right? I get to
Mhm.
do talk to the clients about their ideas, like workshop ideas with them, help them figure out what it is that they truly want out of a video. Like why even make a video in the first place, right? To storyboarding and getting the logistics done. And of course, being on the ground and shooting it, especially if these are in like remote places, you know, uh, and editing is also part of it too. This is why, you often don't hear about people just giving out raw photos or raw videos, because the editing also plays a huge part of it, right? So it's hard for me to pick out one part. I think it's easy for me to say that, I don't want to do one thing forever. Yeah, I don't want to do
Fair
just
enough. Yeah.
one thing. Yeah. I think part of the reason why my shooting is at the level it is today is because I edit. And part of the reason my editing is at the level it is today is because I shoot, right? They go hand in hand. And someone who only shoots misses out on an opportunity to see where their footage has failed, or see failed, or they miss out on the opportunity to see where they can grow, right? Like when you edit what you shoot, you have a very intimate relationship with that, and you can pick out things that you're like, oh, you know what? I have this tendency to, I don't know, like hold my camera tilted 1 degree to the left a little bit, right? All my horizons are a bit off.
Got no one else to blame but yourself because you also shot it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Speaking of which, if you were working in a team with different people editing or like storyboarding or filming, how do you communicate that? You have a storyboard. Usually, like when I do a video, I have everything in my head and I just shoot the way I want to shoot and edit the way I want to edit. Right? But in that like super detail, you want this video to become exactly what you want it to be from the storyboard. How do you communicate that to another team member?
Well, you got a director, right?
Yeah.
Either you have a director or you are the director, and the director usually works with the DP, the director of photography, who's like the primary camera person. And you guys, you shoot it, you review it, you go over it, right? You guys would talk about it. When I worked at MEC, there was this other guy. There's a team of two, me and Lawrence, and he was kind of like the director and the DP, and I would be like the cam op, and we would talk about it, like what's his vision. Like he's like, oh, I want to get this mountain biker, I want him to like pop through here and to follow him through the shot. And then I'd be like, okay, so this is what you want, and we do it, and he'd review and was like, oh great, you got it. Or like, oh, you know what, let's go and punch in about 20% tighter, and let's try it like this way, right? And obviously that's like that type of shooting, right? If we're shooting a live event, you don't really have that option as much.
Yeah.
It'd be more like we're going for the tone of promoting this event. We want to keep it lighthearted. We want to keep it fun, bouncy, and kind of entice people to come. And so you kind of take that and you're like, okay, you're going to shoot in a certain way, in a certain pace to achieve those goals, right? But I mean, just like any project, it's all about communication, right?
Yeah.
Not just video.
Talking and a lot of trial and error, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully, the more you say, the less trial and error. Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I also had another really important question. When you decide to take your hobby on as like a professional career, did that diminish any of your passion for that original hobby? Like video example, did it diminish your passion for like making videos since it became your job?
Um, hmm, probably. Like there were
You say
definitely
that so matter of
times.
factly.
But like it's
Like,
not, I guess it's not a significant amount then. Maybe
Yeah.
it's just like,
Well,
I don't know.
I'm trying to think of a way to properly capture that feeling where like there's a lot more pressure to, like because up until that point, I'd always been like an employee. I've always had like a steady paycheck, right? So making that jump was a big change for me, and the pressure of always like booking enough, right? You get to a point where you would always have that in the back of your mind somewhere, and sometimes it's louder than others, right? It didn't stop like me wanting to do what it is I still wanted to shoot, I wanted to edit, I wanted to create these videos. But I think there are times when just the pressure gets so high that you have to figure it out, right? You have to like, okay, all right, I guess we'll have to dip into savings this month, or whatever it is, right? Or sometimes you have to take on um, projects that you wouldn't be your top choice, but then you keep that in mind. Okay, this month I have to take that on, right? How are we going to learn from that kind of thing? So I think that's, and also because it was just like a new sensation of not the uncertainty, right? And now there's uncertainty still there. It's just I'm used to it now, and it's not as crazy. But I think in terms of like the actual like shooting and editing and stuff, it's still all good. Yeah.
It's good to hear.
yeah, I think it's hard to say about diminish your passion. I think there's, I think we all have a lot of priorities in life, right? You think about, your father very young, right? Fair to say, Steve, right? So, if you didn't, maybe those harder calls are less hard because it's just you, or it's your family, right? That's how. I don't have any kids, so I still feel like there's other things holding me back from maybe starting my own business or doing something like that. But I think if I were to do it, even if I did something I was passionate about, it's still a learning experience. And there's no way you would be where you are if you decide to hold a part-time job and try to do what what you were doing on the weekends, right? I think, sometimes just based on your priorities and based on what's important to you, your passions, I think they're fluid almost, right? They're fluid, like even with scouting and volunteering and even this podcast itself, right? It's very fluid. Um, but when you're doing it like we are today, or when we're um, finding that right client or that right opportunity, I think it reminds you why you were interested in that thing in the first place. But obviously, life, as it does, gets in the way. So I think it's when I hear people talk about diminishing passions, then like falling out of love of something, like maybe you were, I feel like there's always a reason that's kind of beyond that thing. It's not just that thing that made you, like that you're working on it now. It's always some other factor. Um, Now that we get to the philosophical section of the chat,
Right.
it's always something, right? Like there's always things that are going on, and yeah, because if you had no responsibilities and you're just doing it, and you had like $1 million in the bank account, right? Then your hobby is your job. It's a lot easier when you know to look at like, how am I gonna have food on the table next month, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know
I
if
mean,
that's
if
fair to say.
anything, you can say that it almost made it stronger, because it's like I'm willing to do all this other stuff just to do what I like doing, right? I'm willing to put up with all that risk, put up with all that stress. I'm willing to put up with all these other admin jobs that I have to do just so that I can, produce these for a living.
Yeah, yeah, and it takes a lot of grit. I think there's other things that you learn in that process to, I guess, you appreciate, um, that choice. I mean, I kind of relate it to like us volunteering, right? Like, there are days where I don't want to get up and go to a meeting, and Henry has been in our group for 7 years now, plus, right? So he's a long time contributor. Um, and yeah, like I think there's always ups and downs, but then you see great things like Henry just getting a job last week. I was telling Steve when you were off, right? Like, hey, Henry, you got a great job, and it's kind of doing fun things that you were doing, and what? Funny enough, it's kind of the similar path Steve's leading, and maybe you get opportunities like he did. So instead of newsletters on paper, it's it's a social media newsletter. So you never know. All right, I'm going to say switching gears now, and
Sure,
just have
yeah.
a blank. So Henry, if you got anything,
We make
to
it.
switch
We
to.
just stayed. Yeah, like I guess another one would be like, what are the two most important qualities a videographer has to have, in your opinion?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like maybe not just a videography, but as a person, I feel like being humble is a good place to start. Um, just being ready to learn, being in a place where you're open-minded to just about anything, right? There's a lot of things that um, I've taken on a lot of gigs that I'm like, I don't know how to do this, but I'm ready to learn, and I'm really ready to do whatever it takes to learn, and also just like taking feedback and criticism well. Um, that's that's something that I've been told back when I was at MEC, that I was just always like really good at taking feedback and criticism. Like I've always been very open to it, and I find that, like, why wouldn't you? Someone's trying to help you out, like, provided that it's actually feedback and not someone just shitting on my work. But if they are, and they're providing some kind of like learning opportunity, it's like the learning opportunity is like right there. You just have to be in a mindset to be able to benefit from it.
Yeah, you
right?
learn anyways if it's actually constructive, shitting on
Yeah,
your work.
yeah, I totally believe that. And it's and as a parent, that's actually one of the main things I try to instill in my kids, is just being more humble, right? Just, if they do something wrong, instead of like jumping to a defensive position, just being like, I didn't do it, or it wasn't me, or this person did it too, right? It's like, no, there's a learning opportunity here, and if you approach it the right way, you can benefit from every single time you make a mistake. uh, yeah, so that's one. I also feel like just being like a respectful person. So in this industry, there's a lot of people who, you work with a lot of people, whether, even if it's like, you're working on your solo, by yourself, you're still having to, talk to clients, and, still having to deal with talent and actors, and, or if you're working on teams and stuff. This is um, it's very like, because it's service based, right? It's like, people work with you not just of your skill, but because of the type of person you are, right? So if
Mhm.
you're respectful, then you get called back, right?
Yeah, good work.
On the next
Yeah.
job, you get called back. And if you make mistakes, and you own up to it, and you're humble about it, and you're respectful, I find that most people are like pretty chill about things like that, because you're definitely going to make mistakes, right? Everyone makes mistakes. um, yeah, I don't know, just
Basically be chill. Be a
be
chill dude.
be a good person, and you'll be a
Yeah.
halfway decent videographer. Right?
That's a
Oh,
that's
that
a
sounds
dad
simpler than I
answer.
thought.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Steve.
I was gonna say, like, if you like, because sometimes, you have your good days and your bad days and stuff, and you'll automatically kind of weed yourself out if you're not cut out for it, right? And if you are cut out for it, you are going to, do the hard things, right? But if you're humble and you're respectful, you can do anything you want.
I got a story that involves us. I guess when Steve consulted Karina and I for our wedding video, we had some fun chats. I remember, getting going, and it was during COVID, and we didn't know where the location was. We didn't know what was going to happen, and yeah, you guys were very open and honest. We know you obviously by reputation and stuff that you've done. But I remember I told you guys what was important to us, and I said to you, really want to make sure the audio is good. And that's something we haven't talked about in this whole time about making things.
We didn't even do a sound check.
We didn't even do the sound check, and then we had the faucet going, right?
Yeah.
And I said to Steve, I like, maybe it's because I saw someone else's wedding video and the audio was pretty bad, and then there was these like speeches and people were crying, and like as the person watching, it just didn't make sense. And I did another project for school, kind of graduate school, and I was watching these videos about how to make a good kind of film, and then they say that, you have to have good audio, because it can be a crummy video sometimes, but if the audio is crisp, people will still pay attention. But the reverse, it won't happen. So I think, Steve, I refer this to you, and I told you. And I remember when I was doing my vows, Steve recorded our vows beforehand and after. So in case he missed it, in case we couldn't get a live feed, you had that second version.
That's
I
a
know
good
that's
tip.
part of your process, but it was something that I mentioned to you that was really important to me. And then you kind of like took the feedback, consulted the way you did. And then you worked really well with the DJ and the guy that was there. So like, just from that, like, two pieces of advice, I know, Steve, you're kind of saying it sounds very generic and like life, but when I watched your work and your process, it definitely highlighted to me, because we also had another group doing the photos as well. So Steve was there doing the video, but we had another group doing the photos as part of the package. We had another guy doing audio, and we had another scouter doing the live stream as well. So going back to what Steve said about being respectful, being humble, and like trying to learn, we had all these pieces together. They didn't have a pre-production meeting. They all met each other like 2 hours before we were supposed to go. And the DJ got your sound set up. You and the photographer kind of made sure you guys weren't in each other's shots. So I think yeah, it's still humans working with each other. It's still humans supporting each other, as sappy as that sounds. But I wanted really good audio, and I kind of wanted, I don't know what else I actually wanted. I don't know what we're gonna said, but capture people, like faces, and our family, right? So you did a great job. I think we loved it. So I think those tenants are maybe underrated, Henry. Maybe you might be overthinking all the technical, overthinking, like you have to be, you know, Francis Ford Coppola. I don't, I'm just naming some of the like one actor or one director. That right. You need to be Jonathan, or not Jonathan Nolan. That's his brother, Christopher Nolan, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan. I've just been watching his films. The symmetry, the symbolism, right? Like you might think you have to be that, but you know what? I told Steve I want to make sure people hear what I'm saying, and they can see some of my relatives' faces, right? And he took that to heart as the most important thing, and he executed, great. So that's, I'm testimonial to what you're saying there, Steve.
I guess
Thanks, Paul.
the technical thing was like, it stems mostly from me not actually having taken classes on videography at all. Like editing was all just me on YouTube looking at random tutorials, and like there's no After Effects classes that I took, nothing at all. So that would be one worry. That's kind of why I asked the qualities, because like, do you need to have that much experience in like going to BCIT and taking a class in order to actually get into professional filming and like making money off of it, or not?
I mean, I don't think it would hurt to take some coursework, but I feel like coursework doesn't have to be in a classroom these days. I've seen some really good courses on things like Skillshare, where you can take online on your own time. I actually did my drone certificate course online on my own time, and I am a certified drone pilot now. It's the way people learn these days is there's so much flexibility that you don't have to do it in a traditional setting,
Mm-hmm.
which is great because it's a lot more flexible. But yeah, I and that's not to say I don't want to learn. Like when I left university, my parents were like, oh my God, you don't want to learn. It's like, it's the opposite, right? Like I want to learn so many things that I can't waste my time at this place where I'm not learning the things that I want to learn, right? Um, I think it's great to constantly be learning, because this is, things are ever changing, right? So even if you know everything today, you have to keep learning to stay on top of it. Which is why I think it's also great to get out there and start shooting, because then instead of just learning things that are theoretical, or that, it's just kind of nice to have, you actually put it into practice
Yeah,
right
you
away,
actually
right?
apply it. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you like run into an issue while you're shooting, perfect, because then that's a perfect opportunity for you to like find out how to do the thing that you're guaranteed to use at least once right there.
You actually remember how to do it because it's like in a specific video that you remember.
Totally.
Yeah, that makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. Yeah. Pointing back to that thing about like recording speeches before, what if you do miss out on a certain portion of video in that wedding video or whatever? What
Yeah,
happens?
that's the joy of live events. You don't have a second go. I've definitely missed things in the past, and I think that's something that I've kind of learned too. It's like, experience tells you kind of like how to do the highest probability, right? So you got some intuition, you got some experience, you have your skill, and then you have some luck, right? And they say like luck favors those who are prepared, right? So you kind of prepare yourself. That's why when I go to a live event, I have multiple different audio recorders and adapters, so that when I talk to the DJ, I'm like, oh, does he have a 1/4 inch? No problem. Does he have an XLR? I got that. RCA? No problem, right? And all that's just from experience too. Like I've gone to, and I'm like, hey, I've got an XLR, and they're like, oh, I have a 1/4 inch. You got one of those? I'm like, right.
Next time.
Yeah, and also I feel like it's setting expectations as well. Like when clients book us, when couples book us, they don't book us because we don't miss anything, right? Because in order for us to miss like nothing at all, we need a huge team, right? And there is a trade-off too. Like I'm gonna geek out a little bit here. I have a friend who loves zoom lenses, right? Like he has one lens, his favorite lens is a 24 to 105 f4. He's like, I'll never miss anything. It'll cover everything, right? I'm like, well, you're missing all, like my favorite lens is a 25 f2. I'm like, your 24 to 105 won't miss anything on the focal range, but you'll miss everything wider than f4, right? And for me, it's like, well, I have that option, but I'll miss every like focal. Like you're always making trade-offs, right? So it's not about getting everything, it's about setting the right expectations. So we usually talk to our couples. We're like, you know what? We realize that this is a live event and we don't stop you. We don't get you to redo things. We don't, in the middle of the ceremony, oh, hang on a second, right? That's one of our selling points. The selling point is that we kind of blend in with the event. We don't take over the event. We're part of the event. And, it's like, will we miss some things? We might. Like we've done enough of these that we try not to. And the things that we miss, to date, knock on wood, like no client has ever been like, hey, you've missed this thing, right? And if it does, we'll have a chat about it, and I'll be upfront. I'll be like, I'm sorry. I'll look through the clips and be like, I'm sorry I missed it, right? But it's about setting the expectations where it's like, by having fewer people, having a more intimate setting where you're not feeling like you're swarmed with cameras, you kind of have that balance. And by communicating with your client ahead of time, you guys come to an agreement. Or maybe it's like, no, I want to have 3 different angles all the time. I'm okay with a bigger team. Then it's like, well, I can recommend a friend of mine who works that way, and he has a bigger team. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Setting expectations, and then some things you can miss, I guess, if they're not as important to whoever the client is. But yeah, experience and preparation.
I think you got to remember also, I mean, any sort of client management type of person will tell you, really, you got to talk to the client. You need to unravel things about them so you know what is a priority before you get started, right? And I think Steve did that for us. But I think like I've been to a bunch of weddings before. All our friends are like, Karina are kind of last in our bunch to get married. So we saw all their videos. We saw what happened. Someone's mom got like 2 photos of herself, and she got really mad at the photographer who they paid like $5,000 or $6,000, and there's like 2 pictures of a mom, and the mom was a big part of the wedding, and they kind of overlooked that, right? So it's little things like that. I think with experience you'll definitely know, but you got to have those conversations. You got to, it's a people business, just like everything else, right? Like I was in banking before, and I'll tell you right now, I did an economics degree, and you'd think that, oh, I'll just, shower all these people with economic knowledge and forecast, and they'll sign up and do whatever. But it was about the relationships, about knowing about their kids, about knowing about their family, about knowing what they liked, when they like to meet. The communication style was on the phone. Was it via email? Was it in person? Was it off-site? Like those are the things that I think as a freelancer, especially as a business, you're your own business development and marketing team. You're your own, client engagement team. So you have to be able to unravel those things. And if you do a good job doing that, and you find out that they only like really want 2 things, everything else is gravy, then that's where you're going to get them. But if you don't know those 2 things, you might think they want great audio, but they want panoramic, whatever. I'm the non-technical guy here, but like they want shots of like the background, but then you just focus your time on audio. I know that's being a bit kind of extreme, but then you're going to get a product that no matter how great you think the shots were, but you'd miss the audio, then doesn't the clients, they don't care. Right.
And I've definitely, had to learn that through experience, right? They're definitely in the past, not in the recent past, luckily, and everything's been okay. But in the past, there has been clients where it's like, oh, did you get this? Or, I was hoping for that. And I would have to, basically be humble about the fact that I didn't get it and, try to make it up to them the best I can.
What's your approach? Go back to asking some questions here. What's your approach to someone who like doesn't know what they want? Like, what do you do in those situations?
We have to do some like feeling out of things. Like we'll look at a few different videos and be like, okay, did you like this one? And like, yes and no. And then try to figure out why it is, right? And just if we do enough of those, we can usually find a pattern.
Great. That's a great answer.
It's usually where I go. And then, it's often like, okay, let's take a look at some examples. Let's look at other people's work. Let's look like what speaks to you kind of thing. Yeah.
Also trial and error, yeah.
Yeah, but hopefully not on their actual day,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we did a pre-shoot. I think that was really good. Hang and just kind of get the feel, like almost like a practice run, right?
Yeah.
I often wonder if that's kind of a way to, like a dress rehearsal, like right, like it's a way to get a feel of the people and before the actual.
Yeah, I mean, if you have the time to prepare beforehand, it's great. Like, if it's not a live stream event, like, yeah, you have all the time in the world, basically. Assuming people that are actually participating have the time to sit there and like do whatever.
Right. Well, it depends on the stakes, right? Like if your live stream is a big stakes thing, guaranteed they would have practiced and rehearsed it beforehand on a practice event. But yeah, you're right, Paul. Actually, one of the favorite things about these engagement shoots is to not only hang out with our couples who obviously choose us because they're the right people, and we genuinely like being with them, but also just to like practice being on camera, practice like to see what it's like shooting with us, to hear what directions sound like, to kind of get the vibe, so that when it comes time for like the real thing, you're not going into it for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad we had that relationship a little bit before, because like I don't think I was prepared to do my vows with you in the bathroom like an hour before it was go time. I guess that's some feedback. I was like, okay, I'm like, I don't think you told me. I think, hey Paul, I want to get this on before. Let's just do this most important speech in your life in the bathroom before you tell your wife.
You know what?
Right?
It wasn't planned. I was like, you know what? I'm like fully confident in the audio system and all that. But I'm like, you know what? We're just hanging out before your wedding. I'm like, you know what? If you practice this now, you might be able to, get through it during the ceremony like just that much smoother.
That is a moment that we'll share forever.
Watched.
Oh.
Oh yeah, and another question. Which part of the process of creating a video do you like the best? Is it like the editing, the filming, or storyboarding, or another part?
Oh man, it's hard to say. I feel like it all ties in together. Like for me, at the beginning, storyboarding is really exciting because I'm like imagining all the things that I'm going to shoot, right? And then the shooting is really exciting because I can imagine how the video is going to look in editing. And then in editing, it's super exciting because like I'm imagining it in like the wild where like people are sharing or screening or whatever. So I don't know. It's hard to say. It depends on the project.
Okay.
It depends on the project. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like, yeah, I was working with this sort of live stream team, the team that did weddings and like was it concerts, like putting it on the main screen, whatever. And like I had to do just cam work for the entire time. And it was not the greatest experience, I guess, for me. It was just like holding the camera and panning like left to right and up and down, whatever, following whatever the person holding the switch was telling me to do. And I guess that's what makes me feel like I like editing more compared to just shooting. But I just wanted to see if everyone else had a different opinion on that part.
Yeah. I mean, that's not the camera operating jobs, but that's just the job itself, right? Like there's some jobs where you are like someone's extension of their hand or,
Yeah.
And same like in editing, sometimes there are jobs where I feel like I'm just someone's like I'm just moving the mouse for them, like they're telling me how to move the mouse, right? And there will be clients like that where they're really wanting to be involved, and and that's just like your love for doing this will carry you through those
Trials and
times.
tribulations.
Where you're like, oh, you know what, I am literally just someone's tripod right now, or but
Yeah,
But there are, they have those, like every job, there are certain parts of it that are like less fun than others. But I
fair
wouldn't say
enough.
that that alone makes me not want to shoot, or that like that one gig where I was like a tripod makes me want to edit more, right? And just,
Hmm.
just for that one particular instance, shooting wasn't as fun.
Fair.
Yeah.
Can you tell us some of your hmm, maybe some of your more interesting gigs, I guess, or like a project that was really unexpected or weird, like any kind of crazy stories in the last
Let's
couple
see.
years?
I mean, being on set for a reality show was like a big one for me. I've only done one. I was the second camera op. I think there was 4 cameras and like 13 different audio sources, and we had a producer and the team. It was like a decent team, and it was very different because on a reality show you kind of roll everything, and you're never quite sure what's going to happen. And even though there's a producer there who kind of like who finds these threads and massages these threads, there's still like a lot of it that's unscripted, or actually most of it's unscripted. And so that was different. And having someone like run, memory cards and batteries and stuff to me just to make sure my equipment's all going so I can focus on the literal one thing. So that was like different and something that I've only done once. And that was fun. Let's see, another, I've been like to different I feel like videography is one of those things where it could take you a lot of different places. Like I did a wedding with my partner in Thailand, which was like totally different. That was fun, and we took some days off to like just explore the area. I've been up to Tuktoyaktuk, way up north, right to the Arctic Ocean, and did the ice road there, which is no longer plowed, so it's no longer a thing. I did it in the last year that it was still a thing, so that was pretty cool. Yeah, I don't know. It's just I also mentioned earlier that I did ice climbing for the first time and canyoning for the first time. Um, it was a mountain biking event that kind of got me into mountain biking. So shooting the event got me into mountain biking, and now I want to do that more. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got no that's really cool that you can take your job that way, and like it is almost mixing your hobbies every single time you go out there, right? Like you're traveling, you got your hobby, right? Like you learn something now, you're mountain biking, because of your work, and it's part of your hobby, kind of like all kind of aligns to one. Um, so we have a final question here, Steve. Just want to wrap it up here, and we've asked every guest this. So for our more mature guests, we usually ask about their younger selves. So you've given us a great insight into kind of your career, your life, or parts of your life. We didn't get too personal this time around.
We'll do a part 2 next time.
But I guess what advice would you give your younger self? And Henry's sort of in that age group where you might have decided to take a different path or um, turn your passion into your career. So, uh, what is one thing you would tell, I guess, a younger version of yourself in terms of advice, in terms of either through life or career or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a tough one because I'm really happy, given all like the twists and turns and the pitfalls and obstacles and stuff. I'm like in a place where I'm really happy. I've got a great partner. I've got a great um, job, so to speak. I'm doing what I love. I have this flexibility where I could spend half the week and really focus on my kids when they're with me, and then and still have the support to go to some of these places to shoot cool things in far away places with cool people, right? And so it's hard to say like do this or don't do this, because I kind of ended up in a place that was I'm really happy with.
Mhm.
I think just knowing when to be confident in your choices. I think maybe I would have gotten here soon. I'm like huge maybes, right? Like just
Mhm.
being more like true to what your gut feeling says. Like if you're not into something, right, you gotta be honest with yourself and be like, okay, I'm not into it. Why am I not into it? Right? What is it about this thing that whether it's dealing with people who are maybe taking advantage of you, or if you're putting yourself in situations where you're not feeling comfortable, you know, um, but at the same time balancing that with the fact that you kind of have to put yourself in a place where you're uncomfortable in order to grow and learn and do something new. Because if you always stay in a place where you're comfortable, there's no incentive to do anything different and new. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. It's like do things that are uncomfortable, but be be true to yourself and don't go overboard. I don't know.
No,
No, I think
that speaks to me. Yeah. At the same time, if you're doing something that you don't like right now, analyze why that is, and maybe pursue different options if that's really not what you're comfortable with. And then on the other hand, you don't just sit there and but have to branch off and try to do other stuff, other kinds of videos, and just experiment to see what hobbies you actually are into.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes hard to admit things you don't like to do or don't want to do. You feel like it's society. You feel like maybe it's your parents, right? Your significant other. There's lots of time, especially now with COVID, everyone kind of reflecting on their lives, to think about these things, and it's going to take experience. It's going to take trial and error to know what you like, know what you don't like, right? If you don't like spicy food, there's no point of just keep eating it until you get sick. If you get sick once or twice, don't do it. So no, great advice. Any other follow-up, Henry, before we fully wrap?
Don't pursue eating spicy food or you get an ulcer. This is common sense.
How about you, Steve? I love spicy food.
I like spicy food. Yeah, I enjoy the rush.
Yeah, spoken like a true freelancer, right?
It's conversation. Okay, yeah.
So thank you, Steve, for being on our season finale. I think we might have one more wrap up at season finale for the show.
Oh, thanks. It was fun.
And, yeah, really good to catch up with you, and hope to see some more videos from you. Maybe we'll do some partnerships. If you got any advice on YouTube ads, have you done any of those at all? The kind of short.
Yeah.
Oops.
Let's chat.
Okay, let's get offline.
Thank you so much for all the knowledge you've imparted and all the tips on life, just general and insight on what being a videographer and getting to that point would look like. It's been really helpful.
Yeah, to be honest though, Henry, when Paul asked him, like, I don't know, man, I'm still en route, like I'm not there.
Yeah,
but
it's still very humble.
I just feel like I've gone far enough that I can help someone who's like a couple steps behind.
I don't think it's just a couple steps. But yeah, that is very helpful. Thanks for taking your time to join this podcast.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Paul, for helping me host the podcast today, and thank you, Steve, for joining us today on the podcast. It's been very insightful and very helpful for a future videographer such as me. Thank you, everyone, for listening as well, and we'll see you next time.